Ha! Ha! YouTube isn't a dying, sinking ship. Ha! Alright, so, yeah. Basically, I'm not talking about the Kappa stuff until December 9th hits. If you guys want to learn about that and hear what I have to say about it, I basically agree with Chatatronic. I I have a plan for when or if, everything goes to hell, and it's not one that I want to talk about until I'm sure that everything is going to go to hell. So we're gonna say hope springs eternal, and when December 9th comes, that's when I'll talk about it. Until then, we're just gonna continue like everything is fine. And that means that this video, which I've been planning on getting out for a while now, is finally getting done. So a recurring joke recently in my discussion videos with Joey and Jacob has been, I will never finish Legacy. Like the Doctor Who New Adventure Legacy. Truth is, I have finished Legacy. I finished it a few days ago. Am I terrible at reading books in a timely manner? Yes. Do I care? No. We're just gonna talk about it. So, this is the first in what will hopefully be a series. And yeah. So this should cross if this series goes on at some point, this will cross over with the Eighth Doctor Adventures series, because Gary Russell has written novels for both. I present to you Doctor Who, the Gary Russell Chronicles, where I go through each of the books that Gary Russell has written. And the first one, well, I say books. What I mean by that is novels, specifically. And the first Doctor Who novel that Gary Russell wrote was Legacy for the New Adventures range. So this is technically my first New Adventure. I have never read a Doctor Who New Adventure before. I've read a Doctor Who Missing Adventure before, and that's called Sands of Time. But we're not talking about Sands of Time today. We're talking about this lovely, lovely piece of fan wank that is... Oh, it's such... Oh, it is such my cup. It is so my cup of tea that I love this. I loved this book. Peladon. It's a sequel to the Peladon stories. Uh, Obviously, as you can see, Agador's nice little face, Ice Lord, Doctor, being about to be decapitated. So this book, ooh, it let's start off by saying that I love Peladon as a concept in the Doctor Who universe. I think it is probably one of the most intriguing planets that has ever come from Doctor Who as a concept. And I think it was executed very well in the show, in both stories, and I love both Peladon stories. 2 bits. They're both amazing. But, yeah, so I went into this wanting to like it a lot, and knowing that it was Gary Russell, I figured I probably am going to like it a lot, because you may not have noticed this about my own writing style with Doctor Who, but my writing style tends to be about as fan wanky as Gary Russell's was, still is, kind of. And this first novel that he wrote is no exception to that. There's so much world building for Peladon in here. There's a lot of references to Peladon stuff that even I, at some points, was just like, ooh, I don't get that. Somebody else probably does who's way nerdier than me, but yeah, it's just, oh. So, fanwank aside, is it a decent story? It's all right. It's a murder mystery set on Peladon. The stakes are pretty high. It acts as sort of like a finale to the last 2 stories. It closes off the Federation storyline that Curse and Monster of Peladon both set up, and brings it to a relatively satisfying conclusion, I'd say. Gary Russell's writing style at this point is really easy to read. He's really fun to read, and you can't help but enjoy the book based on that alone. And, well, I have to talk about the Ice Warriors now, because that's one of the reasons I wanted to read this book. I wanted to go through all the Ice Warrior lore that I could find. And this popped up. I saw Gary Russell's name was on it, and I saw this amazing cover, and I was just like, that is something I want to read. So, yeah, the Ice Warriors in this novel are pretty cool. We get some insight into Phaester Osiris and how that's connected with Mars. Not a lot of insight into it, but enough to actually forge a connection. And so that's pretty cool. That's pretty neato. Um, the characters themselves are very sort of typical Ice Warrior characters. I'd say Lord Savar, who's the Ice Lord, he fills in that Ice Lord role for this Peladon story, is probably the most interesting of the Ice Lords I've come across so far. Obviously there's Azaxier, I think, is the one from Monster. I could be wrong. I they both the ones from Monster and Curse sort of blend together in my head, but Lord Savar is no, he's got a unique relationship with Benny, who is an archaeologist, and one of her things is she studied Martians, and so they hit it off because Benny knows about Martians and their culture, and it makes for some really really fun character dynamics between the two of them, and I can't help but love every moment they're on page together, because it's their interactions are just really fun to read. Also, Russell does this thing where he brings the Doctor down off of his high horse and through the narration and through the Doctor's perspective, because one of the things the Doctor is constantly going on about is how bigotry and other sorts of things are not acceptable in his eyes. Like, he's in his eyes, xenophobia does not have any place in the universe, and yet here, that is actually addressed as like a plot point, because obviously throughout the show the Doctor's seen going against that moral he has, and it's never really brought up. But here it's brought up and it's pointed out by Savar himself. The Doctor has a bias against the Ice Warriors, and the book the book makes does not underplay that bias. They talk about it, they accept it, and the Doctor strives to be better, which I just part of me just makes that part of that just makes it feel a lot more the Doctor feel a lot more real in this book, and I don't know, it just adds a layer to his character that I haven't seen really written about elsewhere, so I appreciate it for that. Ace is thrown to the side in this book. I'm not very familiar with the Virgin novel lore and stuff, so I think Ace has left the TARDIS for a while and now she's back, but she also has military training and she gets sent off on her own little side mission that sort of ties directly back into the main plot of the novel, but doesn't really, and it's I don't know, that it seemed to distract from the story. It ties in by the end, but Ace as a character just feels really pointless in this and feels like a waste of space. And I don't know if she's just come back like relatively recently, like if she came back last book, but that is that is a criticism I have with the novel in that case, if that is the case, because that is not the way to reintroduce a character to a series, that just shoving them to the side. That's not a good idea. I don't know, maybe Russell had the draft for this thing written before Ace was coming back. That's why I'm not sure. I'm just speculating, but yeah, Ace is shoved to the side in this, so if you're expecting to go into it and see Ace fighting alongside the Doctor and Benny, once more, then you're wrong. You won't find that at all, because she's not in most of the book. So, there's that. What they do with the king of Peladon in this story is really interesting too, because Terrell is very much different from Peladon of Peladon and fuck, I can't remember the queen's name. Thalira, I want to say? I can't remember. Anyway, so Terrell's a lot different. He's a lot more he's a lot less confident than Peladon, and I'm gonna keep calling her Thalira. I'm probably very, very wrong. But you know, the queen, he's a lot less confident than his mother and a lot less confident than his grandfather in his decision making, and it just raises the stakes of the novel by that much, because you're never quite sure what he's gonna do. You're never quite sure whose side he's on. There's a big portion of this novel where you think he is just as much against the Doctor as the High Priest of Agador character is in this book, and it keeps it unpredictable. It keeps things a little fresh and not just like a huge rehash of the first Peladon story. And yeah, it works very nicely in terms of story, and I do think he is probably up there with his mother and his grandfather in terms of, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? How nicely developed and how rounded of a character he is. He's a nice one. I enjoyed reading him, and I enjoyed reading Chancellor Gebbon, who is just phenomenal character. It's a shame he kind of croaks at the end, but he sort of plays devil's advocate for both Terrell and the High Priest character, and acts as a sort of middleman between the Doctor and the superstitious and all the other weird things going against the Doctor and his friends. And by the end of it, he's just overwhelmed, and you feel so bad for him, and you can't help but just want to give him a big fucking hug. He's great. But yeah, no, as far as characters go, this novel is packed with them, and they're all really enjoyable to read. I seriously can't think of a character that I didn't like reading about. So, yeah, that's some points. Like I said, as far as story goes, it is fairly basic. It's your bog standard murder mystery on Peladon, except the stakes are a little higher this time, and it just feels like an homage, you know? It feels like an homage to those first two Peladon stories, and it feels like a nice conclusion to what was set up in those too. And the world building in it and the little callbacks, you know, are just sort of add-ons. I think this book is really good. I'd recommend it. Is it like the most perfect thing in the world? Probably not. In fact, I'd say my love for it is a little... I love it a little too much. I may be hyping it up a little bit too much, and by a little bit I mean a lot. It's really not that great, but it does rank very highly on my list of favorite Doctor Who novels now. Probably my second favorite one that I've read. So, yeah, this is a really good book. I really enjoyed it. So yeah, that's the first episode of the Gary Russell Chronicles out of the way. So tell me what you thought of the book, if you've read it, if I've convinced you to read it myself. Yeah, I guess I'll see you next time. Maybe. We don't know. Like I said, not going to get into that quite yet. Probably next week or the week after, when we have some more answers. But anyway, here's hoping that this can be the first episode in a series and not one of my last videos. This is Briar Hardo 2 signing off.